Welcome back. A wild week in Wisconsin, the shutdown playing out in real time right here.
And we were along talking with some of the key players like Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, Senator Tammy Baldwin, and Congressman Tom Tiffany.
Today, we're sending a clear message that we will never give in to extortion.
The federal government reopening this weekend after the nation's longest ever shutdown. Federal workers back on the job and now starting to get paid, including air traffic controllers, after a dizzying week of unprecedented cancellations and delays, all under the direction of Transportation Secretary and former Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy. President Donald Trump this past week both promising rewards and threatening punishment for air traffic controllers who called out sick and those who didn't during the shutdown. Duffy in central Wisconsin Tuesday, flying from Wausau to O'Hare and speaking with us.
For air traffic controllers who have called in sick for whatever the reason during the shutdown, should they be punished?
Well, I think what we have to realize is we have some controllers who are put in a very difficult position. They're young. They don't make a lot of money when they first start out. They can make some good money later in their careers, but when they start out, they're not making a lot. They may be the sole source of income. And they were confronted with a real problem. Do I not feed my family, or do I try to find another pathway to put food on the table? And that was very real. And I'm cognizant of that. I don't want to be unfair to people. And that was what they were confronted with. On the flip side, the president yesterday said we are going to reward the controllers that actually came to work, that had no missed scheduled days of work, a $10,000 bonus. He put it out. I couldn't agree with him more. We should reward them. Now, how many I'm going to have that actually showed up every single scheduled day, I'm not sure. We have to analyze that. But I also want to look and say, do we have a continual bad actors? Were some controllers from the very beginning, when they hadn't missed a paycheck, had they started to take time off because the shutdown was an excuse for them? We'll look at those people and we'll work with the union and see what an appropriate response from the FAA will be.
Should they be docked? Should they be docked, as the president said?
Well, so the way this bill, I believe, is going to work is they won't be docked, they'll be paid.
8 moderate Democrats ushered the deal through the Senate. Progressive Democrats this weekend still furious that their demand to extend Obamacare subsidies was not part of the final deal. Some pointing the finger at Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Should Senator Schumer step down as leader?
Look, my focus is how we win this battle on extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. What I was particularly disturbed about as things unfolded was that even if we're successful in the Senate, there is no guarantee that the House of Representatives will take up the measure we send them.
Republicans must now figure out how to address rising health care costs and a promised vote on subsidies in the Senate. Republican Congressman Tom Tiffany, who's running for Wisconsin governor, raced back to D.C. Wednesday after receiving the Milwaukee Police Union's endorsement.
Republicans have had 16 years to come up with something better. Why isn't there something in place to replace the ACA with then?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, it has not been done, but no time like the present, right?
Tiffany with us moments after.
The Senate has guaranteed a vote on these subsidies. The House, a little more questionable on whether the Speaker will bring that forward. It sounds like you would be a no vote if it was a simple question, do we extend these subsidies for a year or not?
Well, we can do so much better. I'm not sure why I would vote for the status quo that got us in this trouble. Remember, these are COVID-era subsidies, enhanced subsidies at this point. They're going to people who make as much as $500,000 a year, plus there's billions of dollars going to the health insurance companies. Is that who we want it to go to? No, we want it to go to the people who are going to benefit from it. So that requires reform. The ACA is not working as it was intended, so we do need to fix it.
And whether that means premiums go up in the short term, that's just part of, I guess, what would need to happen?
Well, let's get a plan in place so premiums won't go up. The premiums are not going up because of this little delay here now. The premiums are going up because the program is failing. So if the program's failing, let's fix it, and that's what we're going to do.
The Governor Evers, kind of has become front and center in this discussion over SNAP in recent days. Wisconsin was one of the only states to fully load these benefits, knowing the Treasury has said, listen, that money isn't there. Would you have done that as governor?
I believe Governor Evers is not following the law at this point, But ultimately, what he should have done is he should have gotten on the phone with Senator Baldwin and said, vote for the continuing resolution so that we know those SNAP benefits are going to be there. I voted to continue to fund government 7 weeks ago, and I'll vote again today to do the same thing. That's what needs to be done.
Was the president right then in saying, nope, stop, all these benefits should be halted for all these people who need this food assistance?
You know, perhaps technically, but at the end of the day, we need to just cast our vote. And I mean, if I were governor, I would have encouraged my U.S. senators, vote for the continuing resolution so we don't have any delay in SNAP benefits getting out to the people.
Last week we talked with Josh Schoeman, your Republican opponent. He seemed to indicate that your name ID and your performance in the polls should be a little higher than it is. How are you feeling about the state of this race?
Oh, we're really encouraged. I mean, I've been in here for 6 weeks, and the outpouring of support across the state has just been terrific. And yeah, we feel really good about this race, and I think people in Wisconsin are ready for the message that we have, that we need to make our state more affordable. Energy costs among the highest in the Midwest now. They used to not be that way. Educational scores fallen behind Mississippi. I mean, clearly there's a failure of leadership at the top here in Wisconsin, and we need new leadership, and I'm going to provide that.
Up next, the shutdown THC ban.